We've got some interesting breaking news. So the ICC prosecutor today announced that they were in fact going to put on the side the U.S. investigation, which we argued the entire time should not have been taken place. And they are going to look at the Taliban.
The new prosecutor, Khan, made the right decision, ultimately reversing what Bensouda, his predecessor, had decided. So we didn't win the first match, but we won ultimately with a new prosecutor who takes a new and I think correct perspective, and that is that the United States military, and the United States of America, not signatories to the Rome Statute. Right. That is, that's the statute that created, for those of you who don't know, that's the statute that created the International Criminal Court, that the United States has the capability within its own judicial system to prosecute wrongdoers of human rights and doesn't need to be subordinate to any international tribunal.
We fought the jurisdictional issue, saying that the United States has its own system. We could do it ourselves. We didn't need this help of the ICC to have their prosecutor looking in on us.
Here's what I'm so glad they recognize, Jay. They know that if they go there and they try to prosecute U.S. service members, it's going to take resources. And why is it going to take resources? Because we're going to show up. We're going to show up each and every time, and we're going to make them defend against those arguments. So you know what? They just say it's easier to leave it to the side.
The Taliban are not going to participate with the ICC, because their violations of international law are legendary.
They do not want the ICC to investigate. And, of course, the previous Afghan government, wanted to be a part of the ICC. The Taliban definitely does not. And, of course, you look back at the history of the International Criminal Court, it was designed for countries that don't have a judicial system that will investigate and prosecute their own people.
The problem is, how does the ICC get its investigators access to the evidence on which it could then judge or determine whether or not there is a criminal offense?
They can spend the resources to do it. The Taliban are not going to let them in the country to investigate, so they're not going to get witnesses. So what they're going to do is making the International Criminal Court, again, which we've been complaining about, a political court. It's supposed to be a court of justice.
It does become a political court, and in fact, it is a political court because what they're doing is playing politics with the United States, playing politics with other nations, trying to insert themselves into areas where they do not have a jurisdiction to insert themselves.
From a military standpoint, the idea that our men and women, your colleagues, would be subject to this court raised a lot of concern for our military.
Not just concern, alarms. I mean, absolutely. And that's the thing our listeners need to remember. You were there really defending the United States military with that they were intent on investigating and prosecuting. The ICC, like the UN as a whole, is very inept, very left-leaning, and tends to be biased against the United States and against Israel.
I think it was President Obama that wanted to join the ICC. Do you remember that? So we've got to keep an eye on the Biden administration here.
I would just tell you they have started with sort of the low-hanging fruit. They're starting to rejoin the Human Rights Council. They're trying to rejoin other institutions at the United Nations that aren't serving a process. Jay, if they're successful in this, the ICC will certainly be in that line.
The idea of internationalism and globalism and the failure to recognize the sovereignty of the United States as a sovereign power that can try its own cases, defend its own military, prosecute its own military if we have committed crimes, and do those kinds of things, makes us a country that is the concept of what we call complementarity. In other words, you don't have to look at us to see that we have a judicial system that can prosecute wrongdoers. Stay out of our business. The United States doesn't need to be part of the ICC.
If you look back at the end of the Obama administration, it wasn't just the participation in apparatus like the Human Rights Council, but Jay, the drive towards consensus, as our buddy Rick calls it, by walking away from the veto power at the Security Council. Jay, what is that? That's delegating authority to the United Nations. I think the Biden administration is probably predisposed in that same direction. I wouldn't be surprised at all for this issue to arise.
Instead of embracing the United States Constitution, instead of embracing principle, they have embraced a globalist agenda, which is grounded in openness and tolerance to all sorts of ideas, however transgressive they may be. And so I think at the end of the day, Wesley's absolutely correct. We need to keep an eye on the Biden administration, because more likely than not, they will take advantage of virtually every opportunity to sell out the United States and to sell out American interests.
24 months ago, the European Center for Law and Justice and our team right here went to The Hague, to the International Criminal Court, to defend American military soldiers. You talk about being front and center. This is an institution, by God's grace, and your generous support of the ACLJ, of which I need to say thank you over and over again, that has allowed all of this to happen. We're able to bring it to you on TV and radio and on a lot of different social media platforms. We're able to go there and do the legal work. We're able to do the government affairs work and the policy work